Assalamualaikum and good afternoon everyone. So today we are going to study about our last topic for this semester, right? So the topic for today is actually regarding the animal management. Okay, so for that let me share my screen. Okay, I hope all of you can see my slide. Okay, so actually the topic for the last class for this semester is actually regarding the using of animal in research, which is we are focusing in ethics and alternative. Okay, and also the wild and also you're also focusing on the wild animal management. Okay, so for the first subtopic, okay, the uses of animals. Okay, so animals are used in research or experimentations in the place of human subjects for various reasons. Okay, so normally as a human, we are going to use the animals first. Okay, as a research subjects and also in the experimentations. Okay, in order for us to replace the human subjects. So animals are most used often in the following cases. For example, in the disease treatment, in the prevention, in the treatments of injuries, basic medical testing, and also in the medical diagnosis. Okay, so this is the examples of the use of animals in the research. Okay, and the most common animals that used in the research is the rat and mouse. So these group of animals are normally used in the research of cancer and also in the study of metabolic disease, tests of drug activity, and also in the genome research. Okay, so the examples. For example, we are talking about the cat. Okay, so normally humans use cats as a subject to study about the heart surgery, the neurophysiological studies, the developments of hearing aids, okay, research on cat leukosis, and also in the veterinary research. Okay, so you can read all other groups of animals that has been used in the research. So ethics, okay. So today there exists a wide spectrum of views on these subjects, which is ranging from those concerned with animal rights to those who view animals only as a resource to be exploited. Okay, so in the previous lecture, we already learned about the animal rights. Okay, so animal rights actually the animal should not be exploited. Okay, and in the view of animal rights also, it is wrong to use animals for human purposes under any conditions, even though as a subject for research. Okay, so all of these viewpoints have contributed to the developments of ethical principles of animal use. Okay, so in terms is a term used to describe the human animal relationships, okay, and how animals ought to be managed and treated. Okay, so this is actually the animal ethics. Okay, which is we describe the human animal relationships. Okay, so the subject matter that includes the animal rights, the animal welfare, the animal law. Okay, so we have in the previous study we already know about several laws that implies in the in animal rights and welfare. For example, we have our AWA, which is we are talking about the Laboratory Animal Welfare Act. Okay, so also we have Host Protection Act. Okay, and we also have the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. So they have several laws and acts uh, in describing the animal ethics, okay, or animal rights. And also the subjects also include the animal cognitions, okay, in the animal ethics, and also wildlife conservation. Okay, so as you remember, okay, in our previous previous second last topic, we have studied about the five freedoms, or we call it as the Bramble five freedoms. Okay, so these five freedoms is originally from a UK government. Okay, which is to report on the livestock husbandry. Okay, in 1965. Okay, it is actually studied from the Roger Brambles. Okay, so this is the five freedoms for animals. Okay, which is the animal should be freedom from hunger and thirst. The animal should be freedom from discomfort. The animal should be freedom from pain, injury, and disease. The animal also need to need freedom to express the normal behavior. Okay, and the animal also have to freedom from fear and distress. Okay, so animal experimentation. So animal experiments are widely used to develop new medicines and also to test the safety to other products. Okay, so this is one of the use of animals. Okay, in experiment. So many of the experiment cause pain to the animals. Okay, and also can reduce their quality of life. Okay, and it is morally wrong to cause animals to suffer from experimenting on them. Okay, which is when we use animals in the experiment, so actually we need to reduce the pain. Okay, we need to reduce the suffer from towards the animals. Okay, so facts about animal research. Okay, 85% of animals used in research are rodents. Okay, which is include the rats and mice. Okay, so rats are used so often in research because their anatomy is actually well known to the scientists. Okay, and make it a lot easier to keep using the rats. Alright, and rats also are easier to handle, and they are also show less stress when being handled by human. Okay, and most laboratory tests on animals are simple single type tests, which is they are normally changed in diet, drawing a simple blood samples, and also administering a drug. So, and the animals are also been given the anesthetics. Okay, if a procedure is going to be invasive in any way. Okay, so continue. Beside rats, okay, beside rodents, dogs, cats, and also non-human primates account for only 3 out of 1,000 subjects in experimentation. Okay, but the humans are still the largest group that is used for research and experimentation and beats out all other labs animals when it comes to testing. Which mean even though we are talking about the animal used in the experiment, but they are very scarce compared to the humans. Okay, because humans are still the largest group that we use for research and experimentation. Okay, two positions on animal experiments, which is in favor of animal experiment. So they have two. Okay, the experimenting on animals is acceptable if the first one suffering is minimized. Okay, so which mean the experimenting on animals can be accepted if the suffering of the animal is minimized. Okay, in all experiments. And the second one, human benefits are gained, which could be obtained by using other methods. Okay, which could not be obtained by using other methods, which means there is no other alternative to gain human benefit in the research. Okay, so because of these two, we can accept the use of animals in the experiment, right? So against animals experiments, so the experimenting on animals is always unacceptable because if the experiments are cause sufferings to the animals. Okay, so we can accept these types of experimenting on animals, or the benefit to human being are not proven. Okay, or any benefit to human beings that animal testing does provide could be produced in other ways. Okay, which means we can use other ways, other methods. Okay, in order for us to to have to get our objective. Okay, beside using the animals in our experiment. Okay, so because of that we have alternative. Okay, we have alternative rather than to use the animals in our experiments. Okay, so we call as a 3 R's. Okay, so the 3 R's, okay, are encouraged to follow in order to reduce the impact of research on animals. Okay, so what are the three R's? So the three R's is actually the first one, the replacement. The second one is the reduction, and the third one is the refinement. Okay, so these three R's actually we use in order for human to reduce the impacts of research on animals. So we go one by one. The first one is the replacement. Okay, so the first alternative, the replacement, is means replacing higher animals with lower animals. Okay, for example, the use of microorganisms, plants, eggs, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrates may be used in some studies to replace the warm-blooded animals. Okay, so we replace the higher animals, okay, with the lower animals. Okay, so this is the first replacement. Okay, and the second one is alternately, the live animals may be replaced with non-animals models. For example, dummies. Okay, we use dummies. Okay, so we use dummies for an introduction to dissecting. Okay, to dissections for teaching the structure of the animals of the human body, right? So we also use other tools and other techniques. For example, the mechanical or computer models, or the audio-visual aids, or in vitro modeling. Okay, we replace the animals, okay, by using other tools or techniques. And the other one is experimenting on cell cultures instead of whole animals. Okay, we use the cell cultures instead of whole animals. So this is the alternative for us to replace the animals, okay, in our experiment. Okay, first you must to remember, we replace the higher animals with the lower animals, and also we replace the live animal with non-animal models. Okay, so the advantage of replacement, okay, the first alternative, the first one is utilizing pre-existing knowledge for teaching. And also the second advantage is applying known principles to a new systems to look for similarities. Okay, we apply a known principles first. And the third one, the third advantage of replacement is actually we are using less expensive animals or models to screen large numbers of agents for toxicity or mutagenicity. Right? Because animals actually expensive expensive materials that we use in certain research. Okay, so even though we have the advantage of replacement, so the alternative or replacement also have the disadvantage. Okay, so the disadvantages of replacement, the first one is actually it depending on the pre-existing information. Okay, and the second one, in a system as complex as a life organisms, okay, all of the variables in physiology and pathology are not known. Okay, so that is why we can't replace the animals in the experiment. And thus, any research on a new biological process must utilize a living organisms at some point. Okay, so normally the research on new biology, we still use the animals. Okay, so the second alternative is actually reduction. Okay, so the reduction is means the minimizing the numbers of animal needed to perform an experiment or teach a concept. So we reduce. Okay, so by examining these parameters, okay, so the IACUC, okay, IACUC just in our previous study is actually the institutional, animal care and use community. Okay, so this IACUC can determine if the thoughtful use. Okay, so the reductions can be used by sorry. So the reducing the numbers of animal use in experiment. Okay, so they use by improving the experimental techniques, or by improving the techniques of data analysis. Okay, so the third one is actually sharing information with other researchers. Okay, so these three methods we can reduce so the reduction also can be used by consulting with statisticians. Okay, for example, to use only the numbers of animal required to achieve the significant result. Okay, and the reduction also can be used by minimizing the variables. For example, the disease, okay, the stress, the diets, the genetics, okay, and etc. So that may affect the experimental results, okay. So we can reduce the number of animal use in the experiment. Okay, so the third alternative that we use, okay, the third R is actually the refinement. Okay, so the refinement is actually means refining experimental protocols, okay, in order to minimize pain or minimize the distress, okay, which using a protocol form. For example of refinement include first identifying pain and distress. Okay, first we need to identify the pain and also we need to identify the distress. Then making plan for preventing or relieving the pain or distress. Okay, and the second refinement is include receiving the adequate training. Okay, prior to performing a procedure. So first we need to train first before we handle an animals in any experiments. Okay, and the third one, the refinement I include using the proper handling techniques for animals. Okay, in order to reduce the pain or distress to the animals. Okay, so refining the experiments or the way the animals are cared for so as to reduce their suffering by using less invasive technique. Okay, then we also can reduce the suffering by better medical care. And the third one, we can reduce the animal suffer by better living condition. Okay, so however, the refining endpoints, okay, the majority of animals are killed at the end of the experiment. Okay, so the animals are killed either because their tissue are required as part of the experiment, or the animal has been killed also at the end of the research, okay, because the scientific objective have been achieved. Then the animals can no longer be used. Okay, so this is the refinement endpoints. Okay, and if the experiments are lead to an increasing amount of suffering during its course, okay, during our experiment, okay, it leads to increase the amount suffering. So it is the best way for us, for human, to kill the animals as early as possible. Okay, so this approach, okay, we call as a human endpoints. Okay, so throughout the experiment we know that our experiment is can increase the suffering, the pain, the distress to the animals, so we need to kill the animal as early as possible. Okay. Okay. So just now we were talking about the animals handling, okay, animal use in experiment. So now we are talking about the second subtopic is wild the animal management. Okay, the wild animal management. Okay, first we go to the domestication. So domestic animals is actually we consider as the animals which have acquired traits not found in their wild counterparts, okay, and often due to selective breeding by human. Okay, then the domestic animals are kept by human for a clear purposes. Okay, and it depends at least partly on human input for their survival. Okay, and are wild animals really wild? Okay, so there is a question: are wild animals are really wild? Okay, so domestication is not an all or nothing process. Okay, so the domestication is actually consists of a progression of phase, eventually leading to a full domestications. Okay, for example, we're talking about the dogs, we're talking about the horses, camel, chickens. Okay, and in some cases, attempts at domestication may not be successful. Okay, as with species of antelopes in ancient civilizations. Okay, and some animals also are in between. For example, the working elephants, okay, are by strict definition not domesticated, okay, but they are sometimes released into the jungle at the end of the working day, okay. So at first they are domesticated, but at the end of the day, so they are released to the jungle, okay, after the working day to feed, to mate, or to behave naturally. Okay, and tame here. Okay, so wild animal might be tame. So the theme here can be defined as amenable to cooperations and not frightened of people. Okay, so this can be achieved for most animals, including the wildlife. Okay, and especially when they are read by the humans. Okay, so it's actually the definition by apply. We also to the call as exotic pets. Okay, but the domestication is may not be achieved. Okay, it different with the with the exotic pets. Okay, so this picture illustrated the relationship between domestic species of livestock and their wild ancestor. Okay, for example, in here you can see that from the jungle foal, okay, the ancestor they become the chickens, the wild boar they become the pigs, the tuppen they become the horses. Okay, so this is actually the illustrated of the relationship between the ancestor and also the farm animal. Okay, so what is the population welfare? Okay. So let me finish up this wording first. Okay. So the population welfare implies a multi-dimensional approaches. Okay, when we're talking about the population welfare, it actually implies a multi-dimensional approaches. So where the individual animal is part of species populations and the species should be considered as a part of complex ecosystems. Okay, so the species might be interact with the ecosystem. Okay, so population welfare is involved issue of the biodiversity, okay, which deal with the genetic diversity within a particular species, okay, including the ability to choose a breeding partner, okay, and also to adapt the local environment, and also to develop resistance to disease. Okay, so they also deal with diversity of different species and of ecosystems. So when this concept is applied to the wild animal in captivity, so the term of we call as the group welfare would more be appropriate. Okay, and they also the population welfare also can be measured by the quantity of resources. Okay, for example, the unrestricted home ranges of the animals, okay, and also the possibility for migrations for the animals, and also the population also can be seen from the terms of quality of resources. Okay, for example, the ability to choose from various type of food. Okay, so how can we assess the population welfare? Okay, just now you already know about the population welfare. So how can we assess it? Okay, how can we assess the population welfare? So since the population welfare and its assessment is a novel concept, okay, so one way of assessment of the population welfare would be to adapt a method, okay, not originally development for this purpose. For example, we use the IUCN. Okay, so the IUCN is actually the red list of threatened species. Okay, okay, for example, the current status of skip horn oryx, okay, is actually extinct in the wild. Okay, so in the IUCN, they write the status of this skip horn oryx is EW. Okay, it's still in wild. Okay, so this is because there are no reliable reports of individuals living in the wild. So the species is only present in captivity or in protected areas. Okay, so this for examples, and several other categories are used in the IUCN list. Okay, depending on the conservation status of the species under assessment. Okay, for example, the extinct in the wild, endangered, vulnerable, okay, near threatened. So you can you can see the status of any animals throughout the IUCN red list. Okay, you can just Google IUCN red list, then you type the animals that you want to search for the status. So it can categorize the animals, okay, depends on the conservation status, under endangered or critically endangered. Okay, so they have, if I'm not mistaken, they have 9 categories. All right. So time and context of human and wild animal interaction. Uh, so So they have a lot of interactions between human and wildlife. Okay, so this is actually a summary slide which topic will be developed in the following outline. So for example, the livestock farmers and wildlife, okay, the interaction between the livestock farmers and wildlife. So the development, okay, for example, the habitat loss and degradation, the pollution and also fishing. So we were looking into the trade, okay, national parks, tourism, zoos, rehabilitations, and also reintroductions, pest and alien species, and also legislations. Okay, so we'll go one by one. So the first one is wildlife livestock. Okay, the relationship between the wildlife and also livestock. Okay. Safe. Okay. So wildlife are often perceived by livestock farming communities as competitors for resources, okay, such as land and water. So in this context, the following issues should be considered. For example, the competition for the grazing, okay, competition for the grazings, okay, that perceived as competition, but they could complement each other. Alright, and also external pressure could make the wildlife exploitation appear more attractive, and also the relationship also between the disease spreading. Okay, so the disease spreading is actually wildlife are perceived as carriers of infections. Okay, but several wild species are threatened by the disease transmitted from livestock. Okay, so it actually either way around, right? Either way around. Okay, either the wildlife are perceived as a carriers of infections, or the wildlife itself is actually threatened by the disease transmission transmitted from the livestock. Okay, so the relationship are also actually regarding the predations. Okay, so the wildlife. Okay, for example, now we are talking about the wolf or foxes or tigers. Okay, so that group of animals that are perceived as a threat to the livestock. Okay, so the relationship, the last relationship between wildlife and livestock is the predation. Okay, so habitat loss and degradation. Okay, the second one, so habitat here, okay, we are talking about where animal live, okay, where the animal are obtain nutrients and water, and where the animals are fulfill their behavioral needs. Okay, so that is we call as the habitats of the animals. Okay, but the habitat loss is actually considered the primary cause of the biodiversity and species decline. Okay, so there are several activities, okay, that affect the habitats. Okay, for example, the cutting down, okay, and the burning forest, the altering wetlands, the agricultural conversions of land, and also the development of coastal area. So this activity will contribute to the habitat loss of the habitat animals. Okay, animal habitat. Okay, so as you can see from this graph, so this is from the BirdLife International, all right. So this graph from the BirdLife International shows habitat loss, okay. As you can see from here, the habitat loss and degradations is actually the far most important threat for bird species worldwide. Okay, so this is the important threat to the animals. Okay, so the second one, the third one is actually regarding the pollutions. Okay, so this is the list of pollutants. Okay. Okay, so pollution has a major effect on animal health and welfare. Okay, so with direct links to the impacts of pollutants on human health and welfare. Okay, for example, poisoning of wildlife is used as an indicator of risk to the humans. Okay, so there are many possible pollutants affecting the air. Okay, so there are also many possible pollutants that affecting the water and also affecting the soil. Okay, for example, here for the air pollutant, for example, the ozone layer, the global warming, okay, the acid rain. Okay, so the pollutants that affecting the air the water and also the soil, for example, the household or industrial waste, the herbicides and pesticides or organic waste and fertilizers, plastic, metal, chemicals, oil and radioactive substances. Okay, so this is all the list of pollutants, okay, that affect the humans and wildlife. Okay, so then we're talking about the fishing. Okay, so if you still remember in our previous study, we were talking about the bycatch, okay, or overfishing, Emma, or overfishing. So overfishing and bycatch, okay, several species that includes the whales, okay, that include the whales, have been brought close to extinctions by overfishing. Okay, so the increased annual land catch is matched to a decline in stock. Okay, and accidental fishing or non-target catch or bycatch. Okay, so another issue is the accidental fishings of non-target catch. For example, you are talking about the dolphin. Okay, the dolphin that injured or killed in nets that used for catching the tuna actually. Okay, that is why we call as the accidental fishing, okay, or non-target catch. And also the human stunning and killing of mammals and avians, okay, from species is a subject which has been scientifically investigated with important practical applications. Okay, then the relationship between humans and wildlife is actually trade. Okay, so trade, the demand of the life, okay, let me so the demand for the wildlife is often seen in the pet industry. Okay, we're talking about the pet industry or the zoological gardens and also the biomedical research. So this is the demand for wildlife. Okay, so the demand for meat is described, okay, in our previous topic, okay, in our previous is used to remember, and the demand for byproduct can be seen in the clothing, also can be seen in the accessories and ornaments industry, okay, and also in the traditional medicine. Okay, so this is the demand for wildlife. Okay, so then we are moving to the national parks, which is the wildlife and game reserve. Okay, so we have the aims here. Okay, so the national parks provide, okay, as we know, the national parks provide the opportunity to preserve areas, okay, of habitat, okay, preserve areas of particularly environmental importance. Okay, whereas the game reserve are development in order to provide control hunting opportunities. Okay, and also we also have the aim here of the nature parks, which is for the human entertainment and educations. Okay, and also the nature parks are also aimed for the conservation of species and also for income for the local people. Okay, but they also have the conflict interest of human and animals, which is they have the restrictions of grazing in the national parks, and also they are faced by the hunting or illegal hunting. Okay, so then we move to the tourism. So okay, other than the we know the benefit of tourism. So other than the economic incentive, okay, so there seem to be very few benefit that associated with the tourism. Okay, and this particularly true if the new infrastructure such as hotel. Okay, we're talking about the tourism. Okay, so we're talking about the hotels and transport network are needed to support the increased flow of tourists to that certain tourism place. Okay, which means for tourism, it implied the cost. Okay, for example, the cost is disruptive human presence. Okay, which is we are building the road. Okay, and also the other cost is source of pollutions and habitat loss. Okay, and also income mostly not for local people. Okay, and disrupting a local communities in that certain area of tourism. And we have alternative. Okay, so other alternatives is it the ecotourisms, okay, which is the visitors are attracted by well preserved natural resources, which is including the wildlife. So a form of tourism involving the visiting fragile, pristine, and relatively undisturbed natural areas. Okay, so then this intended as a low impacts and often small scale alternative to standard commercial mass tourism. So either then we need to face all of these courses. So we need to do the alternative, which is eco tourism, okay, compared to the standard commercial mass tourism. Then we move to the zoos, okay. So zoos have always been primary to entertain people, okay. However, it is argued nowadays, okay, that the zoos are no longer for entertainment, okay, but for educations of people about the wildlife. Okay, and furthermore, the zoo also should contribute to conservation of endangered species, which mean by promoting in situ. Okay, so in situ in here we call as the in the wild conservations. Okay, as opposed to the ex situ, which is in the captive conservations. Okay, and there are a serious concerns about the welfare of animal kept in the zoos. Okay, so there are a rise of several questions, which is does the captive breeding truly address the conservation issue? Okay, or is the conservation acceptable at the expense of welfare? All right. So as you can see from this figure, mm. So this figure, these two photograph shows the rather obvious differences in enclosed design. Okay, as you can see from these two um, figures. Okay, so we have already suggested that in order to assess the enclosures in zoos, we have to have the five freedoms of criteria. The Brown Bells five criteria. Okay, which is the animal should be freedom from what. Okay, we have five here. So more widely adapted is the assessment of the quality and also the quantity of the facilities in the zoos, okay, which can allow for the following behavior categories. For example, the social behavior. Okay, we have a lot in here. So, for example, in the terms of social behavior, so the bears. So, for example, in here bears, right? So the bears, the bears are not in generally gregarious animals, okay, because they are live on their own for most of the year or together with their cubs, okay. So and also it also can be expressed in the categories of feeding behavior, okay, and also for the exploratory behavior, the locomotory behavior. So the locomotory behavior, which is can be encouraged by providing a varied or three-dimensional enclosure for the bears, okay, and also for the resting behavior. For example, we need to provide like protected lying area where the animals, okay, where the bears can be hide from the public, from the humans, okay. And also the last categories is actually the last behavioral categories is actually the comfort behavior, okay, which means the human need to provide the facilities which allow the animals to groom, okay, which allow the animals to scratch, to chew or to bath, okay, which mean to provide the area or to provide the facilities for the animals to behave naturally, right? So the second last one, if I'm not mistaken, is actually regarding the rescue and rehabilitation. Okay. So the aims here is actually at rescues and treatments of individual of wild animals, okay, in respective of the conservation status of the animals. Okay. Even though the animals are not endangered animal status, but we also need to rescue and treatment. Okay, if the animals are get injured. Okay, if the animals are get injured. So there are some issues, okay, in the rescue and rehabilitations, which mean we need to require expert knowledge, okay, in order for us to rescue and treatment or to give the treatment to the wild animals, we require the expert knowledge. Also, what can be done with the animal once it has recovered? Either we need to release it into the jungle or we need to rat it, okay. And also the expensive practice, okay, to rescue and treatment is actually they can have the expensive practice, which is time, okay, in the term of time, and also in the terms of resource consuming. Okay, and also the other issue is actually monitoring of rehabilitated and released animals. Okay, so then we move to the control of pests and intruded alien species. Okay, so in here, pests of historical importance, for example, rodents and also invertebrates. So alien species in here is actually means any species accidentally or deliberately introduced in a new environment, okay, with deleterious effects on the local fauna. So actually, the certain animals are regarded as a pest by the humans, okay, and the preventions of the pest is actually most effective way of dealing with the pest animals, with the such animals. And the pest control can be aided by strict hygiene measure and secure storage of food. All right. So in the human pest control in here in general is actually the current methods of pest control, okay, are unsatisfactory with regards to the welfare of the target species. For example, if you are use the method of poisoning a rat, okay, so poisoning of the rat can cause a slow and also painful death. So this is actually unsatisfactory, okay, if we are talking about the animals welfare. Okay, because when we want to kill the pest, even though the rest is actually, we consider as a pest, but we are put in the stress, put in the pain, we put in the suffer on the rats. Okay, and the last one, we're talking about the legislations, okay, the making of the law, right? So, okay. So most area of wildlife welfare, okay, are covered by some legislative background, okay, either by the international bodies or national legislation bodies, okay. So the animal health and welfare, okay, international movement of endangered species and preservation of biodiversity, okay, are among the subjects to be covered in the legislation of the animals. Okay, so for example, for the international bodies, we have CITES, we have the CBD conventions on biological diversity, we also have the international conventions of the regulations of whaling, we also have the CMS, we also have the conventions of the conservations of European wildlife and natural habitats. Okay, so for example, in the national legislations, okay, so we have the biodiversity law of Costa Rica, Malawi National Parks and Wildlife, the Animal Welfare Act, okay, the AWA, and also Wild Mammals Protections Act. All right. So but however, even though we have the laws, even though we have the legislations regarding the animals, but the enforcement, okay, the enforcement of the law is actually one of the major problems with respect to the wildlife legislation. All right. So we end for our last topic, okay, for this whole semester. Okay. So thank you very much for your cooperation. I hope you can doing well in your final exam. Okay. So if you have any, if you have any questions regarding this topic or previous topic, you can just WhatsApp me. All right. So Assalamualaikum. See you guys. How to stop recording here?